So this is our last session. What I wanted to do is touch on one last area that Scripture describes our universe that science shows is the right way to look at things. And then also just kind of give you a chance. This is, ask whatever questions. This is kind of the last time where you have a free opportunity to do that. And so this talk of this session's Hope in a Decaying Universe, because this universe is going to die. And that's kind of what Scripture says. I mean, we see that in Revelation. But before we get into that, what I wanted to do is, who knows who Ernest Shackleton is? All right, we got one, got two. What Ernest Shackleton, what's he endeavoring to do?
I just know he was a human.
Wow, that's brilliant. All right. Bold statement there. No, Ernest Shackleton was a pig. No, I'm joking. He is actually a person. He set out on a mission in the early 1900s, 1911, if I remember correctly. He set out on a mission to cross Antarctica. And he was a very robust, or not robust is not the right word, a very capable leader. And he had a ship built. He selected a crew, actually ended up having a stowaway on the cruise. So there were 27 people meant to be on the ship, 28 when you count the stowaway, and they were going to go down to the South Georgia Islands, and so this is Antarctica here. We're looking at things on the South Pole. South Pole's right in the middle there. They were going to start at the South Georgia Islands. They were going to take their boat all the way in, land on Antarctica, and then they were going to cross across Antarctica. They were going to get to the South Pole. There was a mission from the South that was going to go restock at the South Pole, and then they were going to come on out, and they were going to get out. And they built the ship to get this done. This was arguably the strongest wooden ship ever built. The keel, the bottom part of the boat, was 4 pieces of oak that were over 7 feet thick, because you think you're going to be sailing into ice, you got to be able to hit stuff, you have a lot of impact on this and not have any damage. The sides were anywhere from 18 to 30 inches thick, so 18 to 30 inches thick, the sides of the boat were. The bow actually was specially chosen oak trees that had grown in the shape that the keel and the hull were supposed to do. A total of 58 inches thick, so the bow, this was just a ship designed to do this. If there was ever a ship to go to the South Pole, at least in this era, this was it. And it just kind of got me thinking, when we think about life here, or life, this was a planet that was designed for life. When our planet first started, what were the conditions when the planet first started? What? It was void, formless and void even. What else? Darks and? Covered in water. And we like to think, ooh, that'd be nice blue water, but we can actually go back and figure out what the chemical composition would be. It would be a very iron-rich water, so it'd be kind of this green, murky planet, or green, murky water that was eventually, as God transformed it, and took it from this place that was uninhabitable and ultimately made it into this lush, habitable environment that is just teeming, again, with a diverse and thriving array of life. And what's interesting is that when we compare that with planets around us, we can go, for example, we can look at Venus. Venus has an atmosphere that is 40 times denser than Earth. And that atmosphere, instead of being made up with, what's our atmosphere made up of dominantly? Oxygen and? No, not hydrogen. Oxygen and hydrogen would be really cool because eventually a spark would happen and the whole thing would explode and make water. Oxygen and nitrogen, yes. Instead of being made up of oxygen and nitrogen, the atmosphere on Venus is made up of carbon dioxide. So that 40 times thicker atmosphere made up of carbon dioxide means that even though Venus is a little bit closer, surface temperature of Earth is right around 15 degrees Celsius, maybe 30 degrees Fahrenheit. No, it's more than that. 15 degrees Celsius is about 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Surface temperature of Venus is well over 800 degrees Fahrenheit. Because this atmosphere, carbon dioxide is a really good greenhouse gas. Having 40 times the atmosphere and it's all carbon dioxide means that all the heat that comes in gets trapped, and it is just a hellishly hot planet. even though largely started out looking a lot like Earth. It's about, if I remember correctly, about 11% less massive than the Earth, but nonetheless, it just does not look anything like Earth today. And similarly, when we go out and look at our other neighbor, we go look at Mars. Mars is much smaller. I think it's about 20% the mass of Earth. But Mars looks also nothing like a habitable planet because it has virtually no atmosphere. It's very cold. It's got big dust storms on it, virtually impossible to breathe. And so when we look at Earth and we compare it to the other ships around, if you will, Earth was designed for us to be here. We just see evidence of that. And so Earth is our endurance, the ship designed to carry us where we're meant to go. Now, what's funny is when you look at, well, we talked about how the various aspects of design, we got the plate tectonics that goes on, and how if Earth were bigger, its plates would be too thin, and you'd have this just incredible amount of tectonic activity. If it were smaller, the plates would be too thick, you'd get no tectonic activity. Both of those are bad for life. Talked about the moon formation event, how it had to happen at just the right speed, just the right angle, just the right time, and how the moon is critical for maintaining Earth's habitability. And we can just go through many, many things like that. But what we see is that the endurance of planets is the Earth. For thus says the Lord, who created the heavens. He is the God who formed the earth and made it. He established it and did not create it a waste place, but formed it to be inhabited. And so we see evidence that this planet is designed. That's just the way it looks. Now, as you start to actually go explore Shackleton's journey, and I would encourage you, there's a book out called Endurance that actually articulates what all went on in the journey. It's records from the people who were actually on the journey. They set out from South Georgia Island. They ended up sailing along, and then they got down to here. Notice where they are not. Where are they not? They are not on land. Where are they? Stuck in the ice. The ice was thick that year. They weren't able to make it all the way in. They got close. But they just weren't able to do it. So the ship actually got stuck in the ice. I believe it was around, I want to say it was October. I forget the exact time, but I'll give you the final. They were stuck in the ice for well over a year. Because they got down, they got stuck in the ice, they can't go anywhere, so they can't abandon ship and sail out, so they just have to ride. This ice kind of moves across there, and what we'll find is that the ice kind of drifted over here, and they just lived on the ice, they lived on the ship, they were able to do things, but the ice, it would expand and it would contract and it would expand and contract. Yes, Kate. They killed sea lions and burned the blubber, and they hunted things to eat. What's that? So they took equipment to stay warm, but then while they were down there, they were hunting animals so that they could have food to eat. They were able to burn. These animals have lots of fat on them, so you can burn that, and it provides heat.
Get out of the boat, but they just couldn't get to the land?
Yeah, they could get out of the boat. They just couldn't go anywhere. And so they floated along for quite some time until after a few nights, as the sea ice expanded and contracted, it crushed the ship and it sunk. Now, they had 3 lifeboats, if you will, that they got off the ship. They kept all 3 lifeboats. They got all the supplies off there. But here, this ship that was supposed to carry them to the journey, allow them to complete it, eventually the ship sunk. Now, interesting historical trivia. About a year or 2 ago, they were actually able to send a probe down, and they found the ship. And you see endurance written across the back end of the ship, and there's little odd things growing down there because it's really cold at the bottom of the ocean, so there's not a lot of things that would decay and rot the wood. Looks like it's in pristine condition. It's really kind of a pretty cool thing. I would encourage you to go look at that at some point in time. So their ship sunk, but I wonder if there's a parallel with that with Earth. Now, yeah, there are, because when we look at the history of Earth, we find evidence of things that would destroy humanity. And so I've just got this brief list of humanity killers. About 250 million years ago, there was a large lava eruption. And I'm talking large lava eruption that lasted for roughly 1 million years, and it generated over 1 million cubic miles of lava. Yes?
It like continually erupted for 1 million years.
Yes. You know, so it's, I mean, in some sense, it's kind of like Hawaii. I mean, there's this hot spot down on the bottom of the ocean that's continuously erupting a lava, and it's building up building up islands and stuff like that. So there's a lot of lava there, but this is 1 million cubic miles of lava. Far more. What's the size of the largest island? Is it, I mean, roughly, is it like about 50 miles by 50 miles, something like that? Maybe a little bigger. So let's say it's 100 miles by 100 miles. That would be 10,000 square miles on the surface, and it's no more than 5 miles deep. So that's 50,000 cubic miles of lava. This is 1 million cubic miles of lava. So this, I mean, take the big island, and it's that a lot of times over. Now, what happened in this eruption that happened, 90% of all species went extinct, including insects. You know how hard it is to kill all the insects? It is really hard to kill all the insects, but this actually exterminated most of the insects, and the oceans at the end of this time were well over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So this sort of event, were it to happen today, and it happened in the past, it's happened a couple of times in the past, there was a similar volcanic eruption around the time the dinosaurs went extinct, about 66 million years ago. So these sorts of things happen periodically. And if they did, they would wipe humanity off the face of the earth. We're not going to survive if the oceans are greater than 100 degrees Fahrenheit. We just can't tolerate those kinds of temperatures. So there are 5 major extinction events on the earth. Only one of those did all the insects go extinct. This was the one that they did.
And how do we have insects now?
Because God created new insects, or made new insects. So there's another kind of humanity killer that we know happens. Again, I'll give you just an example of one time where it happened. A 6-mile object about 66 million years ago landed or hit the Yucatan Peninsula and caused a lot of destruction. Yes?
Sorry, you said that God created new insects, but where does it say that in the Bible? Where is the...
So it says that God created or made all of the animals, right? But when you go, so we like to think, okay, all of creation is in Genesis 1 and 2, but it's not. There are other creation passages. For example, if you go read Psalm 104, it parallels the Genesis creation passage. In fact, it's a good psalm, so let's go in and read it here a little bit. So let's go to where's Psalms? Psalms 104. Yeah, so if you go through and read through the whole passage, bless the Lord, O my soul. O Lord, my God, you are very great. You are clothed with splendor and majesty, covering yourself with light as with a cloak, stretching out the heavens like a tent curtain. He lays the beam of his upper chambers in the waters. He makes the clouds his chariot, walks on the wings of the wind. He established the earth upon its foundation, that it will not totter forever. You covered it with the deep as with a garment. The waters were standing above the mountains. At your rebuke they fled. At the sound of your thunder they hurried away. The mountains rose. The valleys sank down to the place which you established for them. You set a boundary that they may not pass over, so that they will not return to cover the earth. So you see the parallel with what's going on in Genesis 1 there, right? Well, when you get down towards the end, lions roar after their prey, seek their food from God. So talking about all the animals. So here we're in the context of the 5th and 6th creation day. It says the ships move along, Leviathan, which you have formed to sport in it. They all wait for you to give them their food in due season. You give it to them. They gather it up. You open your hand. They are satisfied with good. You hide your face, they are dismayed. You take away their spirit, they expire, they return to dust. You send forth your spirit, they are created, and you renew the face of the ground. Let the glory of the Lord endure forever. Let the Lord be glad in his works. So this is all in the context of the creation week. So you see God extending his hand, things thrive and flourish, he withdraws his hand, they perish, and then he creates again and renews the face of the ground. So that's where in Scripture I would say that's where we get that.
Why doesn't he do that with the other extinct animals that have been?
He has done, well, so he's caused animals to go extinct and he's made new ones. Sometimes those animals, the changes that are going on, new animals are what's coming along. And so sometimes he remakes the old ones, sometimes he makes new ones. God's doing all of that to prepare Earth for us to be here. So does that answer your question or not? So it's not that God causes everything to go extinct and then he makes it back the same way. It's that there are extinction events and then he puts new animals on the earth that are fulfilling his purpose for what he's wanting to do with the earth. Because we like to think that, animals just live and thrive on the earth in response to the environment, but the reality of it is the animals actually drive a lot of how the earth, the animals and what's living affect the planet and prepare it for as it's growing older as well, and until humanity arrives on the scene. Yes, Nick?
So how long exactly do you think creation took? From the beginning of we have formless earth with nothing on it to now God's creating. How long did that 6-day period take?
I would say the start of that is somewhere in between where the earth was formed about 4.5 billion years ago, and about 3.8 billion years ago. Somewhere in there is the beginning of all that creation week. And so at the minimum from 3.8 billion up to about 100,000 years ago where he created humanity. That's where I would say it is.
So 3 to 4 billion?
Something like that. Let's say 3.5 to 4 billion, yeah. They are big numbers, yes. Well, they're big numbers to us, not to God. Again, the key question is, what is God communicating to us there? And once we get that, we need to adjust to what he's communicated, not to what I like, But so just to give you a sense of what this impact would do, we have a lot of nuclear weapons on the planet. I think there's something on the order of 10,000 of them right now. Each of those, if you talk about the ones that we've actually used in wartime, those are a few, tens of kilotons. We've made bombs that are megatons in terms of TNT of what they will release. If you were to take the entire nuclear arsenal of the world, detonate it at one time, this event would be thousands of times more energetic than that. So this is going to cause a lot of damage. I mean, you're going to get a huge blast. You're going to get a football field-sized tsunamis washing over the surface of the earth. You're going to get a 110-mile crater. You're going to get 50,000 cubic miles of debris. So you're going to take the big island, throw it up into space, shatter it, and then now that debris is going to rain back down on the earth. And we know these things happen every 50 to 100 million years. So we're either it's going to happen within the next 34 million years, or maybe we're 16 million years overdue. Yeah, Blake.
Where is that 110 mile?
It's in the Yucatan Peninsula. So you can actually map out where it is. It's kind of partially on land, partially in the water. But these sorts of events happen. In fact, NASA right now is trying to map out where all the asteroids are that might cause this sort of damage, so that we can hopefully, if we find one, divert it away. Anybody heard of I think it was called DART? Recently, NASA just ran a rocket into, or ran what's that called when you put something in space? A spaceship. Ran a spaceship into one of these comets, or one of these asteroids, to see how it would impact the orbit, to see would we be able to divert something like this that was going to hit the Earth. It hit it, and they're still analyzing the data to see what happened. So it takes a while because we hit it but it's going to take months before we figure out whether the trajectory of this thing has changed significantly before we can measure it well enough to know whether it's changed or not. But like I said, these sorts of things happen. Small ones happen much more frequently, but something like this is going to happen again at some point in time. And if, just say for example, say we can get away from any sort of asteroid impact, for whatever reason there's no volcanic eruption, we also know that the sun is just getting brighter and brighter. The sun is one of the ultimate humanity killers, because what's going to happen as the sun gets brighter, as it increases the heat on the Earth, that's going to cause chemical reactions that will actually remove all the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. What happens when all the carbon dioxide is removed from the atmosphere? Huh?
Death.
To what?
Plants.
You saw that up there, didn't you? Yeah, any sort of plant uses carbon dioxide. All the plants are going to die. The plants dying off are a very critical part of the cycle of how the Earth works, and so that's going to raise the temperature on the Earth well above 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Roughly how hot is that? What other sorts of things happen at 200 degrees Fahrenheit? Water starts to boil. So we're raising the temperature of the Earth up to where the water will boil. It actually is going to remove all the water from the surface of the Earth. That's going to cause plate tectonics to stop. When plate tectonics stops, all the carbon dioxide that's stored in the Earth is going to come up through volcanoes. We're going to get a stifling CO2 atmosphere, and with 2 billion years, all life on Earth is just going to be completely impossible. And if we wait long enough, the Earth, or the sun, is going to grow larger and larger, and eventually the sun's size will be larger than the orbit of Earth, and it will just consume the Earth. Although it's possible the Earth may drift out a little bit farther, but the sun's going to be really close to us, and all life's going to be gone and dead before that happens. So just like Endurance, which was designed to get the sailors to the South Pole, and when it didn't, it got stuck in the ice. Eventually it died. The ship that was supposed to carry the sailors where they were going died. And just in the same way, Earth is going to die as well. It will not be capable of hosting life. So if our hope is in, we're going to figure out how to live forever here, that hope is not possible. It's just not going to work. The day of the Lord will come like a thief, in which the heavens will pass away with a roar, and the elements will be destroyed with intense heat, and the earth and its works will be burned up. I don't know whether these, you see these sort of scenarios sound a lot like that, don't they? They at least match what's going on there. I don't know whether that's what's going to happen. I don't think humanity is going to be around for a few million years to find out. I think this is all going to happen much faster. Kind of optimistic that it may happen in my lifetime. Probably not. But so the time scale may not be off, but this description that the Bible gives of the end of the earth, we see evidence, scientific evidence that backs up, yeah, that sort of thing is going to happen eventually. So no matter how you slice it, life on an earth has an expiration date. Now let's return to our voyage here. They'd been drifting along in the ice for the better part of a year, well over a year. Their ship finally sunk. They got into their lifeboats, and they were able to sail out over to one of these islands. It's called Elephant Island. And you think, all right, hey, we're doing better. The problem is this island is a small island. It has no vegetation that grows on it. It's got some animals that they can kill, but this is not a place where they're going to be able to live. And so, we think, okay, maybe we can go out and find a new home. Can we go out and find another planet that might be able to host life? You think, okay, well, maybe we could go to Mars. Well, unfortunately, let's say we could terraform Mars, make it an atmosphere, whatever happens in there, Mars is going to have just as many problems as Earth does, simply because the atmosphere is going to evaporate away faster because it's smaller. And even if it doesn't, when the sun swells up, it's going to cause Mars to be dead anyway. So our solar system doesn't offer any hope, so we have to go somewhere else. The problem is, it has taken over 35 years simply to get from Earth out to where the sun no longer is the dominant influence. Now, don't get me wrong. This is not where we're closer to another planet. This is just to where the sun, the sun's magnetic field and stuff is not the dominant influence. It took 35 years just to get there. If we're talking about getting other places, it's going to be 40,000 years before we are capable of being closer to another star than the sun. 40,000 years. 80,000 years to actually get to another star. So there are big problems if we're going to get out there. Now maybe we could travel much, much faster. Maybe we could get closer to the speed of light, maybe 10% the speed of light. Then we could get to the closest star in 40 years. That's doable. But if we're going to do that, you got big fuel issues. To accelerate something from the Earth and get it up to moving roughly 10% the speed of light takes the amount of energy that is an amount of energy roughly equivalent to the entire US energy budget for a year. Enormous amounts of energy to do this. And yeah, this is for like a 500 kilogram ship. Now, I don't know, your ship's going to be 100 or 2 kilograms. I'm 100 kilograms. We got one more visitor on there. By the time you add more and more mass, by the time you make it 2 kilograms, you're going to have that much more energy that goes into it. And so you got big fuel issues. Another problem happens is that as you're moving along at close to the speed of light, if you run into little small debris like a BB that's out in space, it's just going to tear through your ship and rip it apart. There's a cool, it's not a comic book, but it's a book that describes weird physics situations and says, all right, what happens if you take a baseball and throw it at the speed of light towards the catcher? You know what the end result of that would be? Actually, it's a little worse than that. You're going to deposit all of that energy right behind the catcher, and it will be the equivalent of a nuclear bomb exploding behind it. You think, okay, baseball can't do that much damage, but the energy of going close to the velocity of light, there's so much energy involved in that it causes this enormous amount of damage. This is the sort of collision problem you have to deal with when you're going at 10% the velocity of light. There's also big radiation issues. Our atmosphere, not only is it pretty, give us cool sunsets, give us a lot of oxygen to breathe, it filters out all the bad radiation that's out in space. If you were to take a plate that was capable of detecting gamma rays and cosmic rays, put it on top of the atmosphere, 1 square meter in diameter, it will have 1,000 cosmic rays and gamma rays every second that it detects. And when we're up in space, that's what we're experiencing. Now, we can do that for short periods of time, but traveling simply to Mars and back, which takes about 4 years, exposes you to about 20% of a lethal dose of radiation. We're talking 40 years to get to the closest star. So we got to figure out how to deal with the radiation problem. And you just got habitat issues. Have you ever tried to take a group, let's say we can get 100 people on this spaceship. Take 100 people, confine them to, you guys are, 30 people here. You can't leave this house for 40 years. Now, y'all like each other. I get that you get along well with each other, but that's a long time to be confined. There are just habitat issues of how do you get humans to be in that smallest space for that long a time. So this idea of going out and finding a new home, it's a pretty big challenge, but there's even a problem with that because the universe has an expiration date. The universe, now at the very minimum, the universe is going to become uninhabitable in about 1 trillion years. Because for life to work, you've got to have places of higher energy or hotter energy and colder energy. So you got to have hot and cold. Eventually, the universe is going to come to thermal equilibrium. Once that happens, it's impossible for life to happen. We're talking 2 trillion years for that to happen. More likely, what will happen in there is that our universe is in this odd state where it's not inflating very fast, like inflation did early in the universe. It's not in its ground state. It's kind of almost in the ground state. And given some recent measurements, there's an indication that somewhere within the next few billion years, our universe will just simply decay into this ground state, in which case there will be this fireball of destruction that moves out at the speed of light and just wipes everything out. And you think, okay, that's not very common. I'm not too worried about it. To be honest, I'm probably going to die here on Earth where it happens. The point I'm making is that heaven and earth will pass away. This universe is not designed to last forever. And so whether we can, even if we could figure out how to move, that place is going to get destroyed as well. Maddie?
Do you think one of
Unless God has constructed it. So I would say no, because one key feature of this universe is that energy, the amount of entropy always increases. I see no reason why that doesn't apply to the multiverse as well, which means the usable energy is all going to decay away eventually. And we can't get to other parts of the multiverse to see whether that's the case or not. Yeah, Trent.
For the short term, why do we have to live on a planet? Why can't we live on a space station like Interstellar?
So it might be possible to do that, but what I do know is that when we have taken humans and put them up in space for a long time, they encounter a number of problems. One, their muscles start to atrophy and decay away. You think, okay, well, you don't need a lot of muscle up there. Your muscles are what keep everything working and pulled together. Your muscles are a critical function or part of how your body works. We also know that the radiation out in space damages the lining of your gut. Eventually, you're not going to be able to eat anything because your gut will not work properly. We know that for many people, being out in space causes mental issues, that it affects your brain and it quits working. Your being out in space causes bone deterioration so that you end up with spinal issues. There's just, living out in space is a pretty hostile environment, and you either have to figure out how to deal with that. For example, I think when you actually put people up in space, the way to keep all of that from happening is that for a large fraction of their waking hours, they're doing physical exercise to keep their bodies healthy. Now, not a whole lot of people want to do that. That's a pretty select group of people that'll do that. And so we're going, I mean, if we go up and live in space, we're going to have these sorts of problems. The radiation problems, you either have to put more mass up there to shield it from the radiation, which means you need more fuel, or you're going to have these radiation problems which cause our body to decay away. The short answer to your question is that God designed us to live here on Earth, not out in space. Space is a pretty hostile environment, and we work really well here on Earth, but once you get up into space, we don't work so well, and there's very little margin for error once you're up there. Contrary to all the cool space programs where you abandon Matt Damon on Mars and he's able to get back, or Interstellar, their ship blows up, but they're able to figure out. All of those things, it always works because nobody wants to go see a movie where everybody in space dies in space.
Yep.
But more likely than not, if we get out there, we're going to die in space. Real upper of a talk, isn't it here? So the universe even has an expiration date. So what is the hope in all that? Well, so when they got to this Elephant Island, Ernest Shackleton recognized, hey, we can't live here forever. We have got to get back to South Georgia Island so that we can take care of people. Notice here that it says the Drake Passage. Anybody know what is significant about the Drake Passage?
Sea monsters.
No sea monsters that I'm aware of. But if you look here, this is one of the few latitudes where there is no land anywhere in there. And so the winds just blow around and they get really big. It is one of the most treacherous places to sail in the world. They have a boat that is roughly the size from me to Rick back there. It's a few things wide, so they built up the sides a little bit higher. Again, this was just meant to go little excursions. Built up the sides a little higher, put some decks across the top, set out in a hurricane to sail from here to there. Ernest Shackleton took 6 people to do that in the boat. They sailed through a hurricane, were driven about. A couple of weeks later, they actually made it back to South Georgia Island.
They all made it.
The 6 people on the boat did. So they took one boat to go do that, left 22 people here, 6 people went to sail over here. Because this was a really dangerous journey. And they ended up running into a hurricane in the middle of it. Now, they got to South Georgia Island. The problem was they landed on the south side of South Georgia Island. All of the civilization was on the north side of South Georgia Island. And this was back before anybody had ever crossed through the central part of South Georgia Island. Now, they're out of equipment. These people here are just waiting to either die or get rescued. They can't do anything. So they took 3 people out of Shackleton and two of his colleagues, took 2 people and said, all right, pack light, we're going to pack some ropes. We are going to just trek over to the other side of South Georgia Island, find the whaling station, and then come back around and get us. They hiked up, and so unexplored interior region of this island. They hiked up to a crag, went through a pass, can't get down the other side. It's too rocky. They back back out. They hike back up to the next one, get through the next pass. Impassable out there. Come back out. Hike back up to the next pass. It's getting around dark time. It's getting around dark now. They're up too high. If they stay up here, they're going to freeze. So they say, all right, coil up your ropes. Let's sit down on them. We're going to slide down the mountain into the fog. They get on. I mean, there's part of me that's like, this would be too cool in the world to do. They're either going to die up here or they're going to die on the way down. So if they don't die on the way down, they at least have a chance of saving people. So they slide down. Lo and behold, they get down to the bottom. All 3 of them are alive. They get up, keep on walking. 36 hours later, they get from one side. They finally find the whaling stations. It took him a number of months to find a ship that could be able to sail through and actually pick them back up later. But all said and done, they spent nearly 2 years from the time they left here, most of it floating along on the ice, about a number of months just sitting out here on this island where they only had basically the food that they could, any sort of fish that would come by and any sort of animals that were there to live. And I will tell you this, Shackleton got all 28 people home safely. Even the stowaway. Now you'd think, here, we're going to put our hope in this ship. This ship is what's going to save us. No, the ship died. Oh, hey, maybe this island is what's going to save us. No, even the island wasn't going to do it. Their hope was actually in the person of Ernest Shackleton, that he would do what it takes to come back and get them. That's kind of all 28 of them made it. A little bit scruffy there at the end of that. Probably did not smell well. But reminds me of where our hope is. This universe is going to decay. This planet's going to go. But where is our hope? And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the crown of glory that will never fade away. See, our hope is not in, do we have a nice planet? Do we get nice things? Are we able to enjoy? Are we going to die? Are we going to live forever? The hope is actually in Christ is coming back to rescue us from this dangerous and temporary earth. I have a great deal of confidence because, as the Bible describes, multiple things where it describes how the universe works, we see scientifically validates that. We can be confident that what the Bible tells us is true. And what the Bible tells us is that Jesus will return. He will come back. He will save us. It's not that he's built us a great place that's going to last forever here. This earth has a purpose. It's temporary. Once it's done, it's a dangerous place, but once it's all done, Christ is coming back and we will receive that crown of glory. We will live forever. That is where our hope resides. And if we put our hope there, we will never be disappointed. So in all the stuff we've talked about, the multiverse, life out there, is there design? Is there a beginning? Is AI going to destroy us? Our hope's in Christ. And we can be confident that God is who he reveals himself, that he is trustworthy and reliable, and he cares about us, and he will save us and do what he said. Any questions? Yes, Nick. Yes.
A while back in one of your talks, you talked about how your views on the flood are a little bit different than views.
Yes.
And that's how they vary a little bit. I was curious on what do you think about the flood account? Just say like a brief explanation of how you think that went down.
So that's a big question. So what I will say is this. As I read through the account of the flood, what I think is undeniable out of that story is that all of humanity perished except for Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives. What's unclear is what's the extent of the flood. I think the flood was probably a very vast but local, regional flood. So it flooded the entire Mesopotamia region because, one, there's some things in there that indicate that even though the flood was still on the earth, you could see the high mountains. So there's a perspective aspect that I think that's a local flood, but a very vast local flood that wiped out all of humanity. And part of why that's important is you look at all the place names and you think, what was God's command to Adam and Eve? Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And yet you look at all the place names and they're all in that Mesopotamia region. They had not, from Adam to Noah, they had not spread out and covered the earth. In fact, in the passage, there's a passage of even after the flood, they're going to build the Tower of Babel so that they don't have to spread out and fill the earth. There's something about humanity that was just rebellious about spreading out and filling the earth. So I think that's what's true before the flood. The flood was a catastrophic event for all of humanity, but it wasn't global in that it covered the entire earth, in part because of what we read in Psalm 104. That on day 3, God separated the land from the waters, and he set a boundary that the waters were never going to return to cover the earth. But it didn't say he would never judge all of humanity with the flood. And so he judged all of humanity with the flood. Everybody except for Noah, his wife, his sons, and their 3 sons, or his 3 sons and their wives were wiped out. From those people, the earth was populated. They eventually spread out and covered the whole earth. What I don't know is when did it happen and what was the actual extent of it. And there's a whole slew of questions that come into that because you can make an argument that the technology being described there is kind of Neolithic technology, which was 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, maybe 5,000 years ago. And so if it was before humanity migrated to fill the earth, it's got to be 50,000, 60,000 years ago. And so there's a whole lot of questions that I have about it. But I do think the flood was catastrophic to humanity. It wiped out all of humanity. But it wasn't a global flood because there isn't enough water to do that.
Do you think it killed all the animals?
It killed all of the animals that humanity had impacted. I don't think it killed the polar bears because we weren't down at either pole. It didn't kill the penguins. It didn't kill the North American mastodon because those were animals that had not been impacted by humanity. But anything that humanity had impacted, it was judged. And part of why I think that's a good way to look at it is that God's judgment always extends to the extent of the depravity, but never beyond that. And so if the animals over in the Americas were not affected by humanity, there's no reason to flood humanity or to flood the Americas. The flood would judge humanity and everything that humanity had impacted. Does that help? Or at least understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay. Blake.
So then come the time, like the end times of Revelation.
Right?
What would happen to those animals we still haven't reached if there are?
There is no place on earth where humanity has not had an impact at this point.
What about the ocean?
We impact the oceans.
All of it? There's still animals down there that haven't had any impact.
They may not have had physical contact, but what we do has impacted what animals do. Okay, so there's this little gray area where there may be animals that live deep enough that I don't know, they may have never had an impact. But they're not going to be destroyed in a flood anyway. But even more than that, what goes on in Revelation is this world has served its purpose. It's going to be destroyed and God will create the new heavens and new earth. And so the whole function of this creation is, among other things, the conquest of evil, for humanity to develop and grow. Whatever God's purposes are for this creation, by the time Revelation comes along, it will have fulfilled all of that. This creation will be destroyed and will be ushered into the new creation. And so anything that's part of this creation and doesn't have a place in the new creation is going to be destroyed in whatever goes on in Revelation. So. Any other questions? Yes, Kate.
Where is the million-year volcano?
Where is the million-year volcano?
You talked about a volcano that went off for a million years. Like, where was that?
I want to say kind of Siberia, that region. That's one of those things I'd have to go look up. There's a whole bunch of little facts associated with all of those that I just don't recall off the top of my head. If I remember correctly, it's the Deccan Traps, Deccan. That one may be the one associated with the dinosaur extinction, but I think that's the one from 250 million years ago.
Where on the timeline would you put dinosaurs?
Dinosaurs lived about 230 million years ago. About 230 million years ago to 66 million years ago. So it's about 150 million years. Maybe a little bit longer than that, but they went extinct 66 million years ago. And there were 3 periods in there. There was the Triassic, the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous. In reality, Tyrannosaurus Rex, T-Rexes were in the Cretaceous, not the Jurassic, but Cretaceous Park doesn't sound as good as a movie title, so yeah, Maddie.
According to that, it was the big impact of the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs, correct?
So there's a discussion there's 2 things that are going on at the same, or in that era. There's a large volcanic eruption that is changing the global climate, and there's an impact. And the question is, which one's the cause? And it turns out it's both of them. But I think the latest evidence is showing that it's the impact was what actually finished everything off. The climate change through the volcanic eruption had pushed things to the brink. You know, it made things really hard, but the asteroid impact was what finished everything off. Yes, Kate.
Another question.
Good.
I'm just giving all the questions that make
All right.
Okay. So if God took only like so long to create the earth and it was so long ago, then why do you think he waited so long to put Adam on the earth?
So what I would say is God had a plan from the very beginning. And the question of why is the earth around for 4.5 billion years before humanity shows up is that in God's plan, it was going to take 4 billion years to prepare things for when Adam was here for what humanity's here for. I think the best explanation I've had, and it may be, we get to heaven and we ask God and he says, no, I was doing this. But the conquest of evil is happening in a pretty short period of time. Considering, the power of Satan and what all is going on there, and the conquest of evil here on earth is kind of in a pretty short period of time. At most, humanity's been around, on the order of 100,000 years. I'm okay there being 4 billion years of history to lead up to this kind of short battle, if you will. Does that make sense?
History, like, as in,
So humanity has been on the earth on the order of 100,000 years.
right.
That humanity is part of why humanity's here is the battle between good and evil, the conquest of evil, Satan's rebellion against God. All of that's what's playing out there. I'm okay with there being 4 billion years of history to lead up so that this is a shorter period of time. I suspect that it's given the way God structured the universe, it was going to take that long for this to come about so that this battle is shorter.
I get what you're saying.
Okay,
Okay. Thank you.
very good. Any other questions? Yes, Brett.
With the ship, when it crashed, why didn't they just get out and continue to their destination on foot? Because they were still going to have to hike and they're on ice sheets.
Is the ice not like one
It's really
piece?
hard to know where you're going on a sheet of ice.
Well, in fairness, they know how to navigate. There was a fellow who, as long as he could see the stars periodically, he could know how to navigate. My guess is that they may not have had the supplies to get all the way in. This is a great question. I haven't thought about it.
2 years though.
What's that?
It lasted a year before.
Well, but they ran out of their supplies and they hunted a lot of animals. They ate a lot of stuff that they caught. They didn't have the supplies to last 2 years. So that's going to make the journey longer. But you're also, once you're stuck in the flow's moving the opposite direction or not the direction you want to go. And so they may not have been able to cover the ground to actually get where they wanted to go. And there's no guarantee that when they got close, they could have crossed the water and gotten onto land safely. And so
They were hoping
Yeah, exactly. So they were hoping they just kind of get free of the ice, they go back, restock, come back, try again. Yeah. So there's lots of things at play there.
When you got snow, and like this, you back home, so when you have snow, everything is white. Even
Yes.
the sky. So
Yes.
it all blends together.
Yes. But when it gets clear, you can see the stars and then you can figure out where you are and you know which way to go. These guys were pretty remarkable explorers. It's really impressive. I mean, you think, okay, I'm going to tell you, all right, your ship's going to get stuck in. Your journey that was supposed to take a few months is going to take well over a year, almost 2 years. And all 28 come home safely. That's a great leadership by Shackleton, but remarkable skills by everybody on his crew. So.
Ironically, when they got back to England, a bunch of them got drafted. Whenever World War I was going on, they went and got shot.
That's just the irony of that is too bizarre. So, any other questions? Yes, Colby.
Did Knights happen before or after Jesus?
Did what?
Knights, the medieval period?
Medieval period would be 1400s-ish. That's after Jesus. Jesus was 0.
They did have knight class, but they didn't have like knights in armor. They had warrior classes with an equivalent.
Yes. Any other questions? Well, I will say, I know some of you may be at the talk tomorrow night. I don't know how that plays out. I have enjoyed being here. You've asked some great questions. I've enjoyed interacting. I will be around tonight. Actually, we're going to go down and watch the sunset a little bit tonight and watch the turtles come in, but we'll be back and around tonight and look forward to hanging out. Yes, Kate.
Thank you for memorizing all my names. That was really cool.
Well, this is Brent, or no, sorry, you're Blake. I did that the first day too. Good night. No, this is Blake, and that's Colby, and that's Hayden. I forgot his name the first time, even though he's the same name as the guy that my brother played basketball with. You are Lily, and you are Keely, which is actually Keeliana, which you said we didn't have to go by that. You're Daniel. You're Trent. That's Seth and Nick and Sean and Trisha. She's from Alaska. I remember that. You're Kate. You're Maddie, but you don't spell it the same way. You're Aiden. I forgot your name the first day. I always have to say ABBA, because I keep wanting to say ABBA because that's a musical group, but I know it's ABBA because that's the same way my daughter's name is pronounced. You're Faith, you're Lauren, you're Caitlin, you are Brett, and you're Zach, and he's Rick. And I'm really appreciative for that first day you didn't move chairs, because that gave me the chance to make sure I associated everybody's name properly. I know, that's true. You're free to move now. I guess I should have mentioned that. But no, thanks so much. Had a lot of fun. Have I at least stimulated you to think about why Christianity is a rational faith?
Yes.
And how to be engaged in those discussions that your generation gets to deal with that mine didn't? Good. Okay. We've done things well.